After making the heart box, I told the recipient I would do something special to display her ensign and saber. In the process, she gave me some leftover tiger wood from her new floor, and I decided to use that. So after cutting the tongue and grooves off each piece, I looked through them and chose what I thought were the best pieces. Okay, you have all watched me with the making of a basic triangle, so I will go through these steps fairly quickly. So let's get started. Measure one side of the top of your folded flag. Add an inch, make your mark, and then cut your wood. Once you are finished cutting that piece, lay it over another board and cut an exact duplicate. From there, either set your miter saw to cut 45-degree angles or simply take it over to your framing jig. If you have not built this framing jig yet, there will be a link at the end of this video. While you are at the table saw, cut your 1/4 inch glass groove on both sides. Then flip your pieces over and cut your back plate relief. This should also be a 1/4 inch deep and a 1/4 inch wide. Your next step is to join the two pieces together. Double check that your glass groove is aligned before you set your pieces. I also use a small piece of plexiglass to ensure my glass groove is aligned and glue free. After it is dry, you can remove your temporary plexiglass and place your triangle on the base piece. I will allow an inch beyond either side of the triangle. Make a mark and then take your piece to be cut. Now we will slow things down a bit because I am making it up from here. In my head, I want simple legs that will hold up the triangle, and within these legs, I want the saber and its sheath to be displayed. They have to have enough height and space in between each piece to look balanced. Okay, here's some Navy trivia. What makes this a saber and not a sword? See how I keep referring to it as a saber and not a sword? Okay, either you know the answer or I'll tell you later in this video. From those two pieces, I will cut a base piece, but this will be a little smaller than the base of the triangle piece, so not to draw attention away from the saber and the sheath. Once I have the base piece cut, I will take something round and round out the edge of the piece to take away that squarish look. From there, simply take it to the bandsaw and cut out your edge. With 230 grit sandpaper, sand down your curve. Like I said, I'm making this up as I go along. So here, I am trying to figure out how high the saber needs to be within the 7-inch leg to give the sheath enough room under it and between the two still look balanced. In your build, your pieces will be balanced by how long you made your legs. But I believe this will work just fine for me. So if you're really wondering how I came up with 7 inches, I actually think I just took this piece of wood here and measured it, and then divided it in half, and magically each piece was 7 inches. Now that's straight up science, isn't it? After you cut your piece in half, you can stand it all up and get a feel for how this is going to work. If it doesn't look right or you think you need to make adjustments, this is the time to do it. On that note, remember that I intend to place a 1/4 inch groove on both base pieces to give my legs a little more support. Now that I think this is starting to look right, I go back and cut the glass groove for the base of the triangle. Now you can't simply just run this on a table saw like normal, or you will leave grooves that will extend beyond the ends of each triangle. So what I do is place a Dremel bit in my drill press and Dremel out the groove between the two marks I made while the triangle is on top of the base piece and it's centered. So all you do is put the Dremel bit in the drill press and then run it through. And I use a straight board clamped down as a fence to keep the board straight. Now I will cut out the back plate behind the ensign. Simply place a corner of your board into the back groove and then lay down your base piece and use it as a straight edge and draw out your cut line. Now you can take your base piece and actually route out the groove, but I think that's just too much work here for something that will never be seen, so I went ahead and didn't bother to do it. Now remember, I'm using tempered hardboard for this. Take it to your table saw and then cut your line. And like always, check your fit to make sure everything looks good before you move on. If you had routed a groove in the base plate, you would have needed to make this back plate just slightly bigger based on those measurements so it could have enough space to slide down into the groove. Okay, now that your back plate is done, let's cut the glass for this so we can move on. What I do here is again take a 90-degree corner of your glass and place it in the glass groove on the triangle. Then, because I know my glass groove was dremeled at about a 1/4 inch deep, I use some tape and place it just a 1/4 of an inch below each end of the triangle. Then I take my glass out, place a piece of tape up against the first layer of tape so I can remove the original piece of tape. This is only a precaution, yes, because I suck at cutting glass, to ensure when I cut I do not have the blade on the side of the glass that will be exposed in case, like always, I make a mistake. Important, I am going to use a board to apply pressure evenly across the glass. Don't clamp directly to the glass, and placing the board on the tape will keep it from slipping and also give you a straight edge at the same time. Again important, ensure when you clamp the board your clamps are not beyond the ends of the glass or you will break it. Simply dip your cutter in some paint thinner and then strike the glass once, then snap it off and check your fit. Okay, find the center of your base piece and then measure away from the center to get an even distance for your legs. You want them to look balanced from the center out, and then the further apart they are, the better it will be for the saber and sheath. We are now going to cut the slots for our legs. Once you have your equal distance, you can use the legs themselves to make your marks. They don't have to be perfectly straight because we will cut these on the table saw and make sure everything is aligned there. Now the measurement that you came up with for the bottom piece, you will use for the triangle base. So find your center and then measure out that same distance and repeat the same process. Remember, you're doing this on the bottom side of the triangle base. Now let's cut the slots. I'm going to eyeball it, so I raise my blade a little more than a 1/4 of an inch. And then the most important part of this process is that your table saw miter gauge is exactly at 90 degrees. Don't use the numbering system on the gauge itself. Take it to your workbench and use a speed square to ensure it is perfectly square. Now you can use a single blade and make multiple passes here, but I just took the time to throw on my dado blade to go a little quicker. Before you cut your second slot, ensure your first slot fits perfect. Now just take the triangle base and repeat the process. Now place some pilot holes through the triangle base into the legs. Do it towards the back of the triangle. This will ensure the legs are held tight into the slots. My drill bit also has a countersink head on them to help hide the head of the screw, but don't worry, this will totally be covered up by the flag. The top of this wood still has the store-bought coating on it, so to ensure my glue holds and has assistance, I will place a screw into the triangle to hold it into place. So drill your pilot hole close to the inside of the triangle to ensure your screw does not break the surface when you install it. Now drill your pilot holes into the base. Remember, don't put any screws in this yet. We still have a lot of cutting to do, and our glass is still not in. At this point, you can place all your pieces together to get a good feel for how high your saber should be. For me, this is actually a repeat of a previous box I built, so I'm going to use the same process. So I am going to make my cuts the exact width of the saber. This way it sits really tight in the holder. Take it to the bandsaw, or if you only have a jigsaw, that will work fine also. Use one piece once cut as a template to draw out your lines for the second side, and then cut it as well. So real quick, if you have been following along, the answer to the sword versus the saber question is that a sword does not protect the hand completely like a saber does. A saber has a piece called a guard that goes from the cuff to the end of the handle. A sword only has a cross. Go back and put your pieces together and see how everything looks. Now we will do the same for the sheath. Hold your sheath up to ensure you will clear the cuff of the sword. My legs are pretty wide enough to allow the sword to stick out far enough where my sheath can be relatively high. So this is going to work for me. Using the oval end of the sheath, I will simply trace around it. This will ensure the tightest of fits. Again, cut it out at the bandsaw or with a fine-toothed blade on a jigsaw. But once cut out, use it as a template to trace out the other side and cut it out as well. Once all looks good, disassemble it and take it to the sanding table. Since the store-bought finish is still on these, you only have to sand the faces that you cut. Use 220 grit sandpaper to get a really smooth face, and then stain each to match the rest of the color of the wood. Apply your glue where needed and screw your pieces together. To make sure they are perfectly aligned with your pilot holes that you drilled earlier, allow a small portion of the screw tip to protrude through. Then align the hole to the tip and then screw it in tight. The last part is to attach your triangle to the base. Apply your glue and screw it on tight. Wipe your glue and you're ready for the ensign. Ooh, sorry, the cameraman must have fell asleep. I guess I'll have to fire him. Wait, I'm the cameraman. Don't! Insert your ensign and screw on your back plate, and you're all ready for showtime. This is a great way to display both your ensign and saber. Overall, it's a pretty easy project, and this time it did not cost a dime. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.